Let's model after the best game devs. Tony Chan here, and welcome to episode 73 of Game Dev Loadout, where I chat with the best people in our industry every Wednesday morning. If you need motivation and tactics for making a successful gaming career, then this is the podcast for you. Now let's chat with today's featured guest, Oded Sharon. Oded, it is a game time. Are you ready?
Hello.
He is the founder and CEO of two companies, Corbomite Games and Adventure Mob. With over 18 years of experience, he made games such as Zbang, Cocktail Run, and Boat O'Reilly. He's also the head of the Israeli IGDA and give GDC talks. And so, Oded, go ahead and give us a bit about your personal life and how you got started in the game industry.
So I'm a bit old, but I'm not as old as some people in the industry. I'm 40 years old, and when I was in high school, I loved playing games. There weren't a lot of games back then. Certainly not a lot of game consoles. I remember starting playing on Apple II, and then PC came along. And I'm from Israel, and mostly I would play all those Sierra adventure games and LucasArts adventure games. And ever since I was in high school, I said, you know what, when I grow old, that's what I want to do. I want to make these kinds of games. And those are, very story-driven games. So I decided when I grow old, I'm going to have my game company, but I need to know how to make those games and tell stories. So I also learned a bit, like filmmaking and TV production, and was doing that during my high school. Or like during my university studies, the first Israeli game company started, and then I found out about it a few months later, and then joined there as an employee. Worked there for a few years, and when it got shut down, I started my own indie company because there was no other company in the country back then. So I said, you know what? If nobody is here and can hire me, I'll just start my own company.
How cool is that? You created the first company, or you kept it going, the industry on your side. I'm curious, like, is it growing over there, or how's the industry looking over there?
It's growing. I started I took over basically a dormant IGDA chapter from like the two people who started the chapter here. And then I ran it for a few years, ran some conferences, and then a few years ago I stopped being the IGDA chapter coordinator for Israel and became more involved with the SIGs, the IGDA special interest groups. I'm no longer leading the IGDA chapter here, but I'm involved in the IGDA Unity SIG, and I run the Unity user group in Israel as well. A lot of indies obviously come to our events as well.
Awesome. You're like growing the game industry over there. You're like the key player, I guess you could say.
One of them. I wouldn't say the key player, but yeah.
Is the game development different over there compared to like the US?
Sure. First, let's start with the fact that we don't have any AAA studios, or at least didn't used to have any. Nowadays, there are some bigger game companies, but they're mostly doing either casino games or social casino games, or like social games for mobile and other social platforms like Facebook. Examples are companies like Dragonplay that are now SG Interactive, Plarium, Playtika, all those games that are making games within the casual games realm.
Oh, are you hoping to be like the first AAA company over there?
Nah, I'm doing indie games.
Gotcha. So let's break it down. What is your main area of expertise as of today?
So I still like doing story-based games and adventure games. I've been going around to some game jams, and when I go to a game jam and adventure games, for me, very easy to make because I've already sort of like learned the pipeline and learned all the components that you need in a good adventure game. So when I did global game jams 2 years ago, that was kind of easy just to, go through it. Recently I'm trying to get into VR because I have like the VR setup at home, and it's very fascinating to me and very exciting to me to play. And that's why I want to make games for that.
Ooh, VR is going to be like a whole new way of storytelling. Is there a game in VR that catches your eye in terms of storytelling?
I've played a few VR games that I did like the story in. To be honest, not too many VR games are story heavy. The ones that I've played that I really liked were Job Simulator and Rick and Morty, the virtual experience. I think the story in Rick and Morty is kind of nice. It's not groundbreaking like stories that I've known from playing games on PC, but it's nice because it doesn't rely a lot on the mechanics, but to have a narrative that involves the two characters from the show that I really like.
Yeah, and Job Simulator is basically like it's like a storytelling of people's real life of the way they work. Well, I guess you could do crazy things in that game as well, though. But
yeah.
So you did a GDC talk on how to create games with like a low budget. So what is something we probably don't know about as indies when working with a low budget to make a game?
So that was like a 20-minute talk. In the talk, I've covered areas like design consideration and how to do games when you don't have a specific talent in your team. For example, you're an indie team and have only like programmers and don't have an artist. And then I was touching about personal stories from my own life. I think like my main point at the beginning of the talk is don't try and think you're gonna make games and be filthy rich by making these games. A lot of these games that are being made, like most of them don't become really big successful games. Some games succeed, but a lot of them only break even or only give the developers a few. Only like a portion of the money they invested or like their time. So if you're an indie developer, I would always just go and follow your passion. Do the kinds of games you want to play and the kind of games you want to work on making. Because if you're going to work for a long time on a game with not a lot of budget, which means you're probably investing your own time and money into the project, then you should at least work on something you like working on.
Yeah, exactly. And when I go on Reddit, like the Reddit game dev subreddit, people are always like thinking their first game is always going to be profitable. How do you persuade them or tell them that, hey, your first game has a high chance of failing, but you just got to keep pushing forward? Like, how do we motivate them or encourage them to keep pushing forward?
There's one slide in my talk where I give this example of a game called Bounce Bounty, and I ask people in the audience to tell me if they know what this game Bounce Bounty is. And usually when I give the talk, nobody raises their hands. I'm sure a lot of your listeners on the podcast also have no idea what this game Bounce Bounty is. It's game number 48 that Rovio made just before Angry Birds.
Oh, wow.
And when they made that game, they were on the brink of bankruptcy. And if they wouldn't have made their, 49th game, they would probably, shut down and, close the company. And that's like a good example of a company that just kept making games one by one. Then they made 49 games, and like the 49th was like the big hit. But all the games before that, almost made the company go bankrupt.
Like right now, I'm just trying to process that right now. The 49th game.
Yeah, you should check it out. Look it up online.
Angry Birds is huge now. It's incredible that it took that many tries to do it. And that's the thing. You just got to keep going and keep trying and keep making better games each time. So what mistakes are most common, even at a pro level when making indie games? Aside from thinking that the first game is going to be profitable, like what other mistakes are most common?
So for me, mistakes are, one is going out of scope, is like doing something that's a bit bigger than what I can afford making or like the time I have to making. A lot of other developers that I see are making, these games that take a year to make and, it's just them. Another one is I'm a firm believer in prototyping your game early and getting to like a buildable, playable version of the game as soon as possible. Preferably within like a day or two, already have something you can, you give a friend of yours and say, hey, try this, see if it's fun or not. Or if it's a story-based game, give them like the 60-second pitch of the game and see if they like it or not. At least like the basic story. But one of the things that is most important about this process is that if you're making something that's not really fun, or it might not be, a great hit, or is not worth working on, you should just stop working on and like move on and just, prototype something new. And a lot of times, I find myself just clinging to like old projects. I made like this game and I had like big visions to its future. And I thought, in the sequel it's going to be this, or in version 2 I'm going to add this feature or that feature. And then the game doesn't really do well, but I keep working on it. I add more platforms, or I it's a PC game and then I put it on iOS as well, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I, keep investing time and effort and, resources just to, keep working on this game that's a commercial failure, just because I have this emotional attachment to it, instead of saying, okay, I'm done with this game. Let's move on to the next episode or next, game.
Yeah. And that's just the hard part of letting go of that ego or that emotion attached to that game. Yeah, that's something we just got to learn and overcome. But overall, give us your key principles for developing indie games with a low budget. Key principles.
You just need to find ways to do things like really cheap or for free, or you just use the free resources you have, and you need to use your strengths as a creative person and not necessarily as a production company. If you're like a small team, buy as many pre-made stuff as you can, assets from the asset store, pre-made game skeletons. Like you can buy, if you're making a match 3 game, just buy a pre-made match 3 games and just tweak it and, change its graphics or whatever. And even then, buy pre-made graphics and don't bother like making 3D modeling every single model and animate everything frame by frame. But, find those cheap alternatives to make something within your scope. And then, find other people that are passionate as you about this project. And then what you can do is work on this revenue share, for example, and not spend a lot of money hiring somebody to program or, make art or something like that.
Gotcha. That's a great idea, using pre-made assets, because it's already out there, and I think they're usually cheap. So you would save a lot of time if you just pay for those assets and focus on like the most important stuff.
Right. I made a game called Herbert's Quest 3 years ago. Its entire budget was $377.
Wow.
And I've worked on that game for the exact amount of time of 5 days, up to the point where it sort of reached a sort of like buggy alpha. And it was me and another friend, and like we bought stuff, like bought assets from the asset store, and that's it. We actually said, you know what, we don't really have $377 to spend all these assets, so let's just, I'll make an Indiegogo campaign. I'll crowdsource, I'll crowdfund all the money, and I managed to raise $1,200
wow.
from the Indiegogo campaign, and we made the game in like 5 days. And now the campaign is still on with Indiegogo in demand, so people can still buy copies of the game. And once we reach $3,000, I can hire some voice actors and then release the game.
And that's so cool, because you can ask people for money that's interested in your project. So
exactly, and then I know if this game is even interesting or not to anybody.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Now, let's take this on a more personal level. You've been in the game industry for many years now. What was the worst moment of your career? That one moment that's still vivid in your mind? Yeah, be very detailed and just tell us that personal story.
So there's like some things I can't really get into due to like legal issues. But let's just say, like a lot of indie developers, a lot of us agree with the saying, publishers are evil. There was more than one occasion where I was working with a publisher and I got totally screwed, including one case when we partnered with this company to do this project, and they literally breached contract and went and hired another company to make the project instead of us. when we invested a lot into this project already.
I still don't know much about publisher. How do we pick and choose which one is the right one, which one is a legit, which one is, trustworthy? How do we go about doing that?
I mean, in essence, all publishers are evil, but you need to make sure you sort of like you cover your bases and be protected and have, your contract with the publishers, have a lot of these clauses that protect you in case something happens. For example, something I learned from friends of mine who was working with either publishers or when they do work for hire, always make sure there's some sort of monetary guarantee. For example, if a publisher takes your game and say, hey, we're going to take your game, we're going to market it, and then you're going to get, 70% of all the revenues. You say, wow, that's awesome. They're going to do all the marketing work, and I'm getting 70%. And then you sign the contract, maybe give them exclusivity, and then they take the game and they don't do anything. And they don't market it or nothing, and you get 70% of zero, which is basically zero. You should always, when you do like this, publisher deal, you either have to take an advance on the royalty that you get. For example, they say, oh, we're going to sell, 10,000 copies and we're going to pay you an advance for those 10,000 copies of the game now. Or just like a minimum guarantee that if they don't sell, 10,000 copies within a year or whatever, then you either get the money or get some compensation.
Interesting. So like an advance payment, like just in case.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Then you share the risk with the publisher basically, and then both you and the publisher has something to lose because the publisher, you already spent time, money, effort, resources, whatever, in making the game. Now the publisher is guaranteed or committed to spend X amount of money on the game, like you've already invested, and then that's how you share the risk.
Yeah. So is it recommended to go to a publisher all the time, or is it better just to release the game with ourselves?
Like I said, in most of the games I've worked on through my career, I've worked as an independent developer. First, it's hard even to find a publisher, especially if you're making an indie game that's a bit different, or it's not like a clone of a big game, or like you don't have something really, really unique or special about the game. It's hard to convince a publisher that, they need to bet on this game. Then once you do work with a publisher, they, like I said, they might not have an interest in to market your game if it's not that successful. And then there's other alternatives to getting the funding you need to make the game and then, market it. For example, crowdfunding.
Yeah, crowdfunding, yeah. What are like bad recommendations do you hear in your profession? Like, do you hear any bad advices given out to any developers that we should avoid?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I'm not exactly sure if I've heard like specifically bad advice that I said, oh, no, you should not do that. Because I've seen cases, games and success stories for things that should not have succeeded, right? Mm-hmm. There is no way to tell if a game is going to succeed. It can be a really, really very polished game and it can fail, and it can be a really, really, dumb, one-click, Flappy Bird kind of game, and it can succeed. So there's no truth. So any advice you take, you basically need to take with a grain of salt and like figure your own shit when you're working on your game. Make your own path. Figure out what's good for you. There's no secret to success or whatever.
Yeah, there's no like gospel advice. It's always different.
You can also see companies that, one game is very successful and then all the rest of their games are utter crap, right?
Yeah. What are the biggest waste of time that we might be doing?
It's a good question. I mean, it sort of brings me back to what I said before, like wasting time on a game that we invested in already that's not successful.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We got to learn how to move on, know when it's time to give that project up and do something new. What have you changed your mind about in the last few years, and why?
I mean, it's not necessarily that I've changed my mind, but I think I've changed sort of like my motivation in making games. There was some periods of time where either choose projects or work on games in order for them to be profitable, and that was like the main goal. Hey, we need to make money, so let's make a crappy game for a crappy client, or like something that we really weren't interested, just to so we'd have some cash. And that sort of like never worked out for me. And today my approach is like more focused on that, on that passion factor, right? Maybe your game is not going to be a big hit. Maybe it's not going to make you rich, but at least you're going to enjoy it while you're working on that.
Yeah, and that's probably the best way to go about it when you're making the game. Don't think about the profit, but think about the process of getting the game out there so people can have fun.
Right, and you do need to think about like your revenue model, and are you making a free-to-play game? Are you making a premium game? Are you, which platform are you making it on? You do need to think about these kind of stuff, but what I'm saying is that's not your primary goal. You don't forget about it, but you don't, you say, you know what? Okay, I'm going to compromise a bit. I'm going to make something that's a bit more, less popular. I'm not going to do a match 3 game. I'm going to do, an adventure game. And I might not have, tens of millions of potential users, but I'm going to have, a few hundreds of thousands, and they're going to be happy and like my game, and I can still make money out of
it. Well, we hear that the Indian market is kind of saturated, or it's really hard to get discovered. What can we do to get discovered in that market?
Guerrilla marketing, like be different, be in charge of your own marketing. And don't rely on, just, hey, I'm going to put my game on Steam, and, everybody on Steam is going to see it and going to, download it, whatever. And you need to sort of like be unique enough to stand behind, like stand above the noise level that exists out there.
A unique factor, definitely. So you got a lot of experience. Yeah, you're much better now, and like you say, your motivation is different as far as the passion. What is like the one of the best investments you've ever made? It could be investment of money, time, or energy. What was that investment?
Okay, so this is a funny story that I kind of tell sometimes. The reason I can afford being an indie developer that doesn't really have a big hit behind him for all these years is because my wife has a very good, steady day job. And then she's like the main provider in our family, and I'm more like stay-at-home dad, take care of the kids part of the time, and then I can work from home on my project. And, sometimes they're better, and sometimes they're not as good. But the time when they're not as good, I don't have to worry about as much because my wife is the main provider. And I think the main thing that I did was 17 years ago, I taught her how to code HTML and PHP, and she just, took that and made that into a career. And then now she's, I used to be the main provider in the family, now she is. And then I can work on my indie stuff.
That's awesome that your wife is, I guess you could say like she's the biggest investment, just like my wife. She helped motivate me through all of this. And so, yeah, that is awesome. Having someone there, by your side, like an accountability partner, it's just so helpful and so motivating. And yeah, when you have that support, you just want to keep pushing and keep making great things.
Yep. So a supportive spouse is really important. In my opinion.
Oh yeah. What was the greatest idea you had to date? Like an aha moment?
So I think my best ideas and the best games I've actually made were very small projects that were made during game jams. One of them is a game called Uniform, but I'm not going to tell you specifically what this game is about, because part of what the game is, like playing this game and figuring what the game is about, but it's like a big metaphor for something that affected a lot of people. And when I sometimes, I carry this game around with me. I haven't really released it on any like big platforms. It's available on Adventure Mob's website for play. But then when you play it, it's like a really short game. It's like 3 minutes long. But when you play it, you go through this realization and I've been going around conferences and game events and I have this game on my iPad, and I let all these famous game designers play this game, and I got to see their faces and how they're really shocked about this game after only 2 minutes or so. So that's one of the games I'm really, really proud of.
Oh, what game is that called again?
It's called Uniform.
Uniform. Okay, I will definitely link that up so we could check it out. Now, the game industry is booming. It is getting bigger every year. What are you most excited about today?
I'm actually really still excited about VR. Like I said, I have the two, both Oculus and Vive at home, and like just putting the device on you, and you're immediately transported into the game world, and you can interact with things, and things become more real. Is something that is really excited about me. It's something that I'm really excited about. But I also know that we haven't really even we're not even hit the tip of the iceberg yet. There's so much that I can envision happening with VR that I already see, being done in PC games or other games that have yet to reach that kind of level of emotional engagement in VR. There are some really good games out there that I've enjoyed, but there's stuff, for example, there was a saying I think 20 years ago when games just sort of became more mainstream, there was a few arguments about whether games are art and can a game make you cry. And, 20 years ago, people would argue that games are not necessarily art, and a lot of people would say they never cried playing a game. Today, for me specifically, it's not true. I've played some games that made me cry. And I'm waiting for that to happen in VR, that, there is going to be some game that you play that's like so good that you say, wow. And for PC, I can list over 10 of those games that I've played that are spectacular. Anywhere between those indie games like Gone Home or Stanley Parable, or those games that are very mind-boggling. And I'm waiting for those kind of games to hit VR, and to be able to play them and say, wow, that was like an experience that changed me somehow as a person.
Yeah, I cannot wait to see what VR is going to be like in the future, where, you're transported into this world, and so everything just feels different, and you're like, I'm pretty sure in the future we're going to have, you could probably move your fingers and stuff in VR. It's going to be so one-to-one with your body, and I can't wait to see what kind of games are coming out there. And now games are much more story-driven now, so it's going to be incredible. I can't wait to see. And AR too, and mixed reality. So yeah, it's a lot to look forward to. What kind of game that you had in mind for VR, if you don't mind us asking?
So I have a few prototypes for games. I haven't really got any of them to a point where I can say, hey, okay, this is ready enough and I can show it to people, because some of them are only in the idea stage, and I'm writing all these ideas. But one of the things that I'm planning to do soon is I'm launching a Patreon page in which I'm gonna expose, or I don't know how to say it. I'm gonna release the first few game design ideas or prototypes to people who are part of my community, and then see what they think, and then show them the prototypes. And then I can keep working on these prototypes and make some good things about VR. There are a few games that I'm making that are, the ideas behind each of them is something unique that I haven't seen in any other games. One of them is an idea, like a drunk party idea that me and a few friends had. Yeah, we were drunk at a party, and then we sort of started spitballing these ideas, and one of them was awkward situation simulator, where basically you're in this, it puts you in a lot of these awkward situations, like you're walking down the street and there's a guy comes up, towards you, and each of you, is trying to go the other way, but both of you turn right, and then you're like, oh, sorry. And then both of you turn left, and oh, sorry. And then it keeps on going for a while, right? This dance where you're trying to cross this person, and both of you are going to the other thing, and then you have to stop, and one of you goes around the other one, and then you can keep moving down the street. So those are the kind of situations that I see are funny and unique in VR that I want to try and prototype and see how to make them.
Yeah, you know what's crazy about that idea is that I think it can help boost people's confidence in awkward situation in real life.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
so it has like different benefits to it. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I can't wait to see if you eventually make that type of game.
Awkward simulator.
That's an awesome name too.
Yeah.
Awkward simulator. What is that one game that influenced you the most and why?
I keep saying Monkey Island or Monkey Island 2. I don't know. Either of them. I think specifically Monkey Island 2 is like the game that I refer to as still like the best game measured by also by the time that it got released, right? Obviously, if you compare, Monkey Island 2 to games made like today, it's kind of lousy. The graphic is really old, but for that time and that period of time where it was made, like the game itself, the story, the characters, it could make you laugh and it make you really really feel something for the characters. That's a game that was for me one of the greatest breakthroughs ever in game history. To the extent where I became, I think, the biggest fan of its creator, Ron Gilbert, and I actually ended up opening a joke website called Buy a Car for Ron Gilbert, which was a sort of a crowdfunding joke because Ron was saying, "Hey, I don't like the holidays. Nobody ever bought me a proper gift. I expected a shiny car out of my doorstep with a note saying, 'Thank you for Monkey Island.'" So, I opened up a website and said, "Hey, people, give me some money. We'll buy Ron a car." And we ended up raising about $100. Most of them came from Tim Schafer, who also bought the T-shirt. I donated money to buy a car for Ron Gilbert, and all I got was this lousy T-shirt.
At least you tried, hopefully, did he thank you for at least trying, or what?
It was a bit, he was a bit embarrassed by the whole thing because he's not. I mean, say why aren't you a fan of something? Somebody really famous, like J-Lo or whatever, when she was really famous back then. But then, I mean, we took it in good humor, and I ended up buying him a small toy car, and I gave it to him in one of the GDCs.
Yeah, that's a funny story.
Yeah.
Why do you love being a part of the video game industry?
I like the people, basically. I mean, first of all, I love to play games and I like making games, which is why I love being in the industry. But ever since I started going to game conferences, for example, GDC, I felt the most at home ever. I always feel welcome when I go there. I feel like what I do matters somehow. And I've been before I became like part of the games industry. I've been a programmer and like high tech companies. I would go to conferences, but I didn't feel like I was important in any way. And nowadays I run a Facebook group called Fellowship of GDC Parties, and anybody who's going to GDC knows that GDC, the Game Developer Conference, takes place from like the morning until like 5-6 p.m. or so when the sessions end. And then afterwards, you go and meet other developers in all these like network cocktail parties. And you kind of want to know where the party's at, right? Where there's like 10 to 20 parties every night. And you want to know which one I should probably go to and where are my friends and which one is, has, food or whatever. So I started this group helping people out every year, finding out information about all the parties. And I ended up getting recognized in the industry as the guy from the party group rather than the guy who makes all these indie games.
What's funny is I just recently joined that group. I think this past week. So I might meet you up one of these parties. And yeah, GDC is something I still haven't gone to yet, and I'm definitely planning to go to next year because I just heard so many amazing things about it. So I can't miss it. So yeah, definitely gonna try to hit that up next year. Awesome. The show isn't over yet, Game Does. Before we go into the lightning round, if you enjoyed the episode so far and want to hear more inspiring stories, make sure you subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or Overcast. So, Oded, I will ask you quick questions and you'll be giving us a ton of valuable information in return. Are you ready to crush it and release the show?
Sure.
What was holding you back from joining the game industry?
The game industry wasn't really a game industry in Israel until, only a few years ago. It took a while to start here. And, I'm happy that I was part of what started the game industry here in the country.
How many game companies are over there?
I think a few dozen. Yeah, like a few dozen big ones. There's, I would say, if you list all the small one and small indie teams, about 100.
That's the great thing about video games. It's just so global. Like it's growing everywhere around the globe. It's insane.
Yeah.
What's a personal habit that contributes to your success?
I want to call it thinking outside the box, but I don't actually believe there is a box. I would more want to say, being a bit weird, because then I can think about, weird or unique games, and then something that's not very norm.
Yeah, that's what helps make the game stand out. Yeah. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
So I gave one of my first games to this game designer, and at the time I kind of ignored his advice, but I should have listened. He said, "You know what? It's a cute game. It's a nice game, but don't bother with it. Just move on to the next project." And I wish I would have listened to him more back then. Just made a new game.
Yeah, that's another thing we should keep touching upon is learn how to let go. How has a failure set you up for later success?
Bolt Riley, the game that I recently released after Kickstarting, started as a failed project that we did. We started working on a game with a publisher, then the publisher sort of like went under and shut down. So we got stuck with I would say 70% of a game that's complete, but we still had 30% of the game to finish working on. And then that's what gave me the idea to run and make a Kickstarter for this game. I ended up doing that. So it was like a mistake, even like working on this game with this publisher, which later turned into, success.
And that's the thing, you didn't give up. You kept pushing forward. Like you didn't let nothing stop you.
Yeah. And even though the first Kickstarter campaign failed, I redid the Kickstarter campaign, and then the second one succeeded.
Oh, so you just got to keep trying until it works. That's what I'm talking about. What's a great marketing tip to make yourself and your game stand out? Like, you said that you have to be unique. Is there anything else in particular that could help?
Just keep looking for opportunities. You see something, you think of something, just do it. Don't hold back. Don't say, I might not, succeed or whatever. Just go for it. The reason Fellowship of GDC parties is over, I think it's 13,000, 14,000 people now. It just began as, this idea that, hey, let's, invite 50 friends or whatever to this group and just share party information. Now it's just exploded.
No more waiting, Game Dust. Take action and get something done.
Yeah.
What resources should we get started today?
I'm personally a big Unity fan because it's free and you can get into game making really easy. There's a website, I'm pretty sure you know it, Pixel Prospector, that gives a list of full resources to a lot of stuff that's either available for cheap or free online, and like a lot of ways to, start. And like the last thing is, just do it, start making games. Don't wait for anything.
So for this next question, it's a bit doozy, so take your time if you need to. Imagine you woke up the next morning in a brand new world and you knew no one. You still have all the experience and knowledge you currently have today. Your food and shelter is taken care of and you have a laptop. What would you do step by step on the path to join and become successful in the game industry?
I would probably go to some game jam. I would find out where game jams are around the world even, and maybe find cheap flights and like fly to those game jams and start knowing people. And I would, open up the game develop engine and just start making the games I want to make.
There you go. Yeah, game jams. That's something I still haven't gone to yet, and I definitely need to check it out. Yeah, game jams where you can just meet like-minded people and create games, within a limited amount of time. So, Oded, we have reached the end. Go ahead and give us a parting piece of guidance in how we can connect with you, and then we'll say goodbye.
Never give up, never surrender. If you watch Galaxy Quest, you know what that means. So I'm going to give out a few codes to the first few people who tweet at me. My Twitter is @SoundGuy. So listeners of this podcast say, "Hey, I listened to your podcast. Give me a free code." And for the first few, I'm gonna send a few free codes of my game Bolt Riley. And then follow my Patreon page. Look for Oded Sharon on Patreon, or I think the link is going to be patreon.com/soundguy. And make sure before you put this podcast on that it works.
Awesome. Hit Oded up. He's offering you free codes to Bolt Riley, so definitely take up on that offer and support him on Patreon. Oded, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. For that, we are truly grateful, and we will catch you next time.
All right. See you later.
Thank you, Game Dust, for listening. And don't forget that knowledge is only potential, power, execution is the game. Go to GameDevLoadout.com and type in the number 73 in the search bar to find Oded's episode for all the awesome show notes that we just talked about. Until then, keep on making great games. I'm Tony Chan, and I'll catch you next Wednesday on the Game Dev Loadout podcast. Peace.